I couldn't ask him anything, not without it turning into a fight. And I mean anything. Simple things. Normal things. Things you should be able to ask your husband without thinking twice. But with Greg, every question was a trap. I remember the moment I realized how bad it had gotten. We were in the kitchen. Saturday morning. I was making coffee. He was reading something on his phone. I said, "Do you have plans for tomorrow?" "That's it." That's all I said. He looked up at me, and I could see it. That look. That shift in his face. He said, "What do you mean, plans?" I said, "I just mean, do you have anything you need to do tomorrow?" I was thinking maybe we could go up to the lake. He put his phone down. His voice got louder. He said, "Do I have to have plans? Am I not allowed to just exist without having plans?" I felt my chest tighten. I said, "No, I'm not saying that. I'm just asking if you're free." He said, "Free for what? What do you want me to do?" I said, "Nothing. I just thought it might be nice to spend the day together." He said, "So now I can't have a day to myself? I have to be available whenever you decide you want to do something." I could feel it starting. That familiar spiral, where a simple question turns into something bigger and meaner and more confusing. I said, "Greg, I'm not trying to start a fight. I just wanted to know if you were busy tomorrow." He said, "Why? So you can plan my whole day for me? So you can control what I do?" I said, "I'm not trying to control you. I'm literally just asking a question." He said, "No, you're not just asking a question. You're implying that I should have told you already. You're implying that I'm doing something wrong." I said, "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking if you have plans. That's it." He said, "Well, maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Why does it matter?" I felt my throat getting tight. I said, "It matters because I wanted to know if we could do something together." He said, "You always want to do something together. You can't just let me have my own life." I said, "We're married. I thought spending time together was normal." He said, "There you go again. Acting like I'm the one with the problem. Like I'm the one being difficult." I said, "I didn't say that." He said, "You didn't have to. It's in your tone. It's in the way you asked the question." I was starting to lose it. I could feel tears coming. I said, "I don't understand what's happening. I just asked if you were free tomorrow." He said, "And I told you. I might be. I might not be. Why do you need to know right this second?" I said, "Because if you're free, I want to make plans. If you're not, I'll do something else." He said, "So it's an ultimatum now? Either I spend the day with you or I'm in trouble." I said, "No, that's not what I said." He said, "That's what you meant." I said, "It's not what I meant. You're twisting my words." He said, "I'm not twisting anything. You're the one who came in here with an agenda." I said, "I didn't have an agenda. I asked a simple question." He said, "There's no such thing as a simple question with you. Everything has to be analyzed. Everything has to be a big discussion." I started crying. I couldn't help it. I said, "Why can't you just answer me? Why can't you just say yes or no?" He said, "Because you won't accept whatever answer I give. You'll find a way to make it into a problem." I said, "That's not true." He said, "It is true. You always do this. You ask a question, and then when I answer, you get upset." I said, "I'm not upset about your answer. I'm upset that you won't give me one." He said, "I did give you one. You just didn't like it." I said, "You didn't. You just kept asking me more questions." He said, "Because your question didn't make sense." I felt like I was losing my mind. I said, "How does 'do you have plans tomorrow' not make sense?" He said, "Because it's loaded. Because you're not really asking if I have plans. You're asking if I'm going to do what you want me to do." I said, "I'm not. I swear I'm not." He said, "Then why are you getting so emotional about it?" I said, "Because I don't understand why this is so hard. Why can't you just talk to me like a normal person?" He said, "I am talking to you like a normal person. You're the one making it difficult." And that's when I gave up. I just stood there, coffee cup in my hand, tears on my face, and I realized there was no point. He was never going to answer me, because answering me would mean acknowledging me, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to fight. He wanted to deflect. He wanted to make me feel crazy. And it was working. This wasn't the first time. It was every time. If I asked what time he'd be home, he'd say, "Why? Are you keeping tabs on me?" If I asked what he wanted for dinner, he'd say, I don't know. Why is it always my responsibility to decide? If I asked if he'd paid a bill, he'd say, are you accusing me of something? Every single question turned into an interrogation. Not of him, of me. I started avoiding asking him anything. I'd just wait. Wait for him to volunteer information. Wait for him to make decisions. Wait for him to initiate conversations. But he never did. He'd sit there on his phone or watching TV. And I'd sit there next to him. And we'd exist in the same space without actually connecting. And when I'd finally break the silence, when I'd try to ask something or suggest something or just talk to him, it would start all over again. I felt like I was walking on eggshells made of eggshells. My therapist asked me once, what would happen if you just stopped asking questions altogether? I said, then we'd never talk. She said, and is that worse than what's happening now? I didn't know how to answer that, because what was happening now was this slow erosion. This constant feeling that I was the problem, that I was asking too much, that I was being difficult or needy or controlling, even though all I was doing was trying to have a normal conversation with my husband. I started writing down the conversations, not to show him, just to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I'd write down what I asked. I'd write down what he said. I'd read it back later. And every time, it was the same pattern. I'd ask a simple question. He'd respond with a question. I'd try to clarify. He'd get defensive. I'd try to explain. He'd accuse me of something. I'd get upset. He'd tell me I was overreacting. Round and round, never getting anywhere. One time I asked him, do you even realize you do this? He said, do what? I said this. You never answer me. You just deflect and argue and turn it back on me. He said, that's not true. I said, it is true. Ask me anything. Ask me any question and I'll give you a straight answer. Then you ask yourself if you can do the same. He said, fine. What do you want from me? I said, I want you to answer my questions. I want to feel like we can have a conversation. He said, we are having a conversation. I said, no, we're not. We're having a fight. We're always having a fight. He said, because you always start them. I said, I don't start them. I ask you things and you make it into a fight. He said, because the things you ask are designed to start a fight. I said, they're not. They're normal questions. He said, to you maybe. But to me, they feel like attacks. And that's when I realized he really believed that. He really thought that me asking if he had plans for tomorrow was an attack. That me asking what time he'd be home was me trying to control him. That me asking anything at all was a threat to his autonomy. I don't know if he was taught that, or if something happened to him that made him that way, or if it was just who he was. But it didn't matter, because I couldn't live like that anymore. I couldn't keep tiptoeing around my own husband. I couldn't keep questioning my own sanity. I couldn't keep feeling like the enemy in my own marriage. I left him about a year ago. It wasn't dramatic. I just told him I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed to be with someone I could talk to without it turning into a war. He didn't fight for me. He just said, fine, if that's what you want. Even at the end, he couldn't just say how he felt. He had to make it about what I wanted. I'm still learning how to ask questions again. How to trust that when I ask something simple, I'll get a simple answer. It sounds stupid, I know, but it's true. I went on a date a few months ago. Just coffee. Nothing serious. At one point, I asked the guy, what do you do for work? And he just answered. He said, I'm an accountant. That was it. No deflection. No interrogation. No turning it back on me. I almost cried right there in the coffee shop, because I'd forgotten what normal felt like. If you're listening to this, because you're with someone who does this, who turns every question into a fight, who makes you feel crazy for wanting basic communication, I want you to know something. It's not you. You're not asking too much. You're not being difficult. You're not being controlling. You're just trying to have a conversation. And if that feels impossible, it's not because you're bad at communicating. It's because he won't let you. And you can't fix that. You can't make someone talk to you if they've decided that talking to you is a threat. All you can do is decide if you want to keep living like that. I couldn't. So I left. And I'm still figuring things out. Still healing. Still learning how to trust my own perceptions again. But at least now, when I ask a question, I get an answer. And that's everything.